Hey, James, can I ask you
No,
something?
Walt, for the last time, I'm not telling you any more about myself. I don't care if it's for fake trivia, or to get into my bank account, or to trick me into saying something using your fancy little microphone that looks like a pen you got from McDonald's when you were 12. I'm not telling you any more things about me. Just leave me alone and do your strange thing away from me. Get out of my room.
Your room? This is our... no, you're right. I'm sorry, man. I was just going to ask you if you think it's a good idea to disassemble all of my Selesnya decks and build Izzet ones instead.
I'm listening.
Oh, I don't want to bother you.
No, I'm here for you, man. I'm here for you, Walt. What's on your mind?
I can come back later.
No. Let's pull them apart now. Yeah, let's do it. Starting with Yashan. It's so funny you should have had this problem today, actually.
Oh, yeah? Why's that?
Well, I've just been to the shops and I've got this fancy new lighter.
That's a blowtorch.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hands. Have we done a Spider-Man reference yet?
Maybe?
we?
I think I did a Green Goblin.
Oh.
Didn't I once go, do you know what I've sacrificed?
Yes, I think we've hit that film already. I thought we were like cutting edge and doing something new.
Well, we've moved from Spider-Man to Spider-Man 2. Yeah.
Yeah, Doc
So
Ock.
we're really moving through the universe.
Do we have to do the third one with the Venom thing?
Yeah, I'll do a skit where I walk in dancing as Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, the bad boy
Yeah.
slicked hair clicking and I love that.
Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast by the Greensboro Commander community. It's the GCP by the GCC and POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. We're all uniting forces to help you to have better games of Commander. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James. Now, we already know what the transmission is for this episode.
We do.
But I did want to shout out all of you amazing listeners that gave us all the questions for last episode and all the incredible questions for this one. Something I've noticed with all the listeners is they want us to do more stuff, which is great. And if they want us to do more stuff, you know where they can support that? Well, do you know where they can do that?
At our house by giving us a crisp high five. No, it's Patreon. Patreon.com/GetCommandedPodcast.
So you're about to be like, and our address is...
Come on over. No. Yeah, you check out the Patreon. It's the absolute best way to support the work that we do. Yeah, stay tuned. We haven't actually spent any of our Patreon money yet, but we have plans for it. So in the very near future, you can expect some exciting developments. And it's because people have supported our Patreon for so long. So please, if you love the work that me and James do, you want to see more of it, you want to see us do video content, merch, whatever, head to patreon.com/getcommandedpodcast and just give us a little bit of money every month.
Yeah, and like to make it more real, Walt and I, this afternoon, after we play Pauper, of course, we are going to be like sitting down and properly nutting out like a 5-year plan for this podcast. We're serious about this, guys.
Yes.
We're like actually doing this.
It's true.
But, Command?
Yeah, I suppose we should, we do have it already, so let's just hear it again. So this is a recorded transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
We have collated the ponderings and musings of your human audience. We require an understanding of the way in which your audience is affected by your broadcasts, and vice versa.
Right.
Okay, we've got the rest of the list in front of us, and I'm so glad we split this across 2 episodes, because it's already looking like a long episode with this list of questions.
Oh yeah, there's some absolute doozies in here, and we are thrilled to get to them. The first one out the gates is a longer one. This is another one of those stories, like we did in the last episode with Armageddon. This one comes to us from Arlo. So Arlo asks, how do you deal with tilted players in your games? There's a player at our shop who gets tilted most of the time when we play together, and it's really difficult to handle them. Let's call them Ralph. Sometimes in a game, Ralph is getting noticeably irritated, and it feels like they're going to slap the next person who interacts with their game plan.
Far out, okay.
And then they cast Craterhoof Behemoth. You have a counterspell in your hand. If you stop them, it's going to feel awful. But if you don't, you're compromising the integrity of the game for everyone else. What's the best course of action? How would you deal with these kinds of situations, both in-game and socially?
Wow, Arlo, great question. This is like, I feel like this is one of the things in Commander that often content creators don't talk about because it's a little bit of a... It's like walking on eggshells on content creating and how to advise people on interacting socially together.
Yeah.
But as a team of Get Commanded, we really believe that the social part of Commander is like the most important bit. So wanting to improve your interactions, Arlo, props.
Yeah.
Great question.
Definitely really important. I think it's really important to note with this one, right out the gate, everyone gets tilted. Like, absolutely, I get tilted, James gets tilted, we've got tilted in the same games, come to each other afterwards and gone, sorry about that.
We actually have, like, hugged it out at the end of games and been like, I'm sorry, bro.
It all gets to us sometimes.
Like you Croson gripping my my Kami Heart expedition.
I am never going to live that down.
No, what the hell, man?
Everyone gets tilted. Look, I think it's worth saying, though, for this specific scenario, if someone seems like they might get violent...
Like physically violent.
Physically violent, because you've alluded to that right here, Arlo. Someone might get physically violent if you do the wrong thing to their board or interact with them the wrong way. That is just straight up not okay.
Yeah.
And if you feel comfortable, I think the most important thing to do here is to say something to either the store worker or if you play somewhere where there's a judge, you could say it to a judge so that they're aware of it. Basically, it's really important that Ralph gets some kind of warning so they don't feel like it's okay to do this anymore because it's really, really not. Again, everyone gets tilted, but if you feel like someone is on the verge of getting violent, that is a level of tilted that you should not have to deal with. And honestly, if it's not like a reasonable solution for you to tell a judge or tell a store worker what's going on, just not playing with Ralph anymore is totally reasonable.
And it feels like really hard to say no to someone for a game. It's actually a lot easier than you think. You can say in ways of like, oh, I'm actually going to wait for some other people that I've promised a game for, or you can skirt around that line of just kind of it's hard to say, but avoiding playing with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think letting your store worker know, for one. I know that within our local community, in our game store, we have a like community group that runs events. You can let those community group leaders know as well, for sure. People are around to help out. And also sometimes it might just be bringing in someone else that doesn't usually play in with that play group that might change the dynamic a bit, make people feel a little bit more comfortable. Yeah.
I've definitely been in games a couple of times where I've sort of been that person.
I've seen you do it as well. Which, by the way, I know it's not your thing to do.
It's not something I usually feel comfortable doing. You'll be amazed. Sometimes your skills in socializing will take over, and even though you don't feel very confident, you might say actually navigate it reasonably well, which I've found with myself on occasion.
It's what good therapy does to a human, actually.
It's true. Being aware of yourself. But even like saying things like, this seems a bit much. Or I wouldn't go that far. You know, really simple phrases that don't say to someone, you are overreacting.
Yeah.
You know, because that feels really antagonistic.
But calm, collected. Like I've heard you say, like, the way you're reacting to this feels disproportionate. And like, I like that wording because it's not saying you're overreacting, you're doing this. It's like, your response to the situation isn't what it could be.
Yeah.
You know, or what it should be, really.
Yeah. And like, you know, I have had people get upset with me because they feel like I misrepresented my deck when I was sitting down to play the game. And so then they got really tilted when my deck kind of popped off and was doing some really amazing stuff.
I'm assuming this was either Wart or Chroma.
It was Kaza.
It was Kaza?
Yeah,
Holy hell,
Kaza was just kind of doing silly extra turn things, which is always possible. Anyway, I said to them, look, I feel I might have misrepresented my deck. I'm sorry about that. However, you know, you're just losing in this particular game. I think your reaction is disproportionate to what's actually happened here, which is the game isn't going so well.
We'll play another one. I'll put this deck away.
Yeah, straight up. So, yeah, I think for this one, I do think priority number one is getting something in place so that this doesn't happen again, which like ideally...
warning Ralph. Like at least having Ralph aware that his behavior is not proper.
But completely understandably, if Ralph is someone who's a bit temperamental, you don't feel comfortable walking up to them, then I think the better solution is just to not play with them. And I think there's, as you said, there's lots of very reasonable ways of saying, oh, I'm actually holding out for a game for someone else today, or not really after that kind of game today. Like, those are totally reasonable ways to let someone know, I don't really feel like sitting down with you today.
Yep. The other thing I wanted to highlight here is, I know it's a bit on the nose, but as Magic players, we do sit in a world of nerddom where social skills might not be as strong in other circles as it is in a local game store.
For sure.
And I do want to highlight, some people just don't have the emotional regulation skills that allows them to understand that they are getting angry at a game and not react in a way. Like, for example, when I get tilted, I really, really try and take a step back, and I can laugh at the situation if I do it successfully. Sometimes it will slip through. I'm not saying I'm a perfect person, but some people don't even have that in their brain. The thing of like, okay, we're getting angry. Why? Is it reasonable? They don't have that regulation. And that
awareness, I think, as well. Like, I've seen you even, you're someone who often takes like little breaks from the game. You'll wander off and grab some food or a drink or just go say hello to somebody else.
Take a breath.
I think it's a really good reset. You know, even if you're not necessarily really angry, if you're just feeling a bit tense or a bit stressed or the game's kind of getting to you, I think it's a great way to reset. I wish I had more of that awareness in me to get up and walk around, because I get really stiff, like physically stiff, because I sit there for too long because I don't have that thing of going like, oh, I'm just going to walk off for a sec, you know?
We were in a game recently where I kind of had a lethal fling on board, and I represented it like, I'm holding one in a red open and I've got this 30-30 plan.
Yep.
And I was kind of dancing around and singing a lumberjack song, and it kind of made you feel like quite agitated and tense, and at the end of it we had a bit of a chat about it, and you had calmed down by that point and let it all go, but in game it was something that I didn't even notice, and it's something that even if I was in your seat I would have reacted completely different. And this is what I'm trying to say, is some people react not personally towards you. They're reacting and it's all internal. So what I'm trying to say to you, Arlo, is don't take what they're saying or doing personally. It's more to do with them. It's more to do with Ralph than it is to do with you. And that's what I'm trying to say.
For sure. And, it can be nice to, in some way, as we've said, like offer Ralph in feedback effectively, either via you or via a store worker or whatever. But as you say, Ralph is their own person.
Yes.
It's not your responsibility to fix Ralph or like make Ralph the perfect commander player.
Ralph is on a journey.
Ralph is on a different journey to you. Seriously though. And so if you don't feel like being part of that journey, just don't, play on different tables.
I like that. This is a good way to start. I feel like we're doing good things for the community already in this Q&A.
I agree.
We'll jump into the next one. The next question is from Nick. Oh, this is a doozy. If we had to pick one color to never play again, including for your decks that we own, what would we drop?
So I did a little bit of reading for this question.
Did some research?
Kind of. So I had a spreadsheet already. I think I've told you before that I've done this.
Oh, color analysis?
Yeah, I calculate like how many of my decks are playing each color, and then so how many decks in total I have that are playing each color of Magic, effectively. I pulled out that table and updated it, because a lot of my decks had no longer existed. I had new decks.
Yep.
It was similar to last time, but actually consolidated itself down some familiar channels.
Let me guess, white and green commonly appeared.
Yes.
Shocker.
There were 7 decks that included white and green. Maybe it was 9. Anyway, I think it was 9 decks that included white or green.
Yeah.
7 that it contained blue or red.
7?
Yeah.
Damn, that's your next up?
Yeah, right?
I have got an influence on you.
But then there were only 5 decks that contained black. And honestly, thinking about it, black is a color that incidentally appears in decks that I build.
It's a secondary color in 90% of the time it appears.
It's like very rare that I set out to build a black deck.
Well, even in like your Arami deck, like as an Arami deck, it's very blue. A lot of people would play a lot more black in that deck than you do.
I was thinking about this the other day. Most people would probably build around me with a bunch of aristocrats in there, because it's a really valid way to win. Like if you just encore just Zulaport Cutthroat
and 3 of them die.
Yeah, it deals, I think, because each of them sees each other. So it deals 9 around the table, you gain 9.
That's wild.
Actually. Yeah, like it's a really good rate. I'm just not drawn to it. So it's interesting. Like, I definitely am more drawn towards the other colors. So for me, it's an Easy answer.
Black's out.
I would just drop black, and I don't think I'd miss it that much.
Yeah, that's fair. It would mean you'd have to disassemble my Chester, though.
I would. I'm not
You
saying
could
it would be
rebuild
easy,
it. You could
actually.
rebuild it as white-red. Like Boros.
It wouldn't be the same.
No, it wouldn't be. You have to have the black aristocrat stuff.
Look, it's a pain. It's always going to be painful,
Yeah.
but I think if I had to choose one, it would have to be black. How about you?
It's got to be green, right? I think it's
Yeah,
pretty obvious. Look,
that's fair.
I was considering green-white like as two different colors to possibly... Because like hell, I'm not playing blue, black, red again. Like,
you build so much in those colors.
exactly. And it's like, it is the play style that I like. The interaction that those colors have is just the way I like to play.
Yeah.
But in terms of like tossing up between white and green, I've actually really enjoyed white recently.
Right.
I've just, it's actually just been posted up on our community Discord. I've just built Savine the Protoclasm.
Yeah.
Which we spoke about. I actually got inspired about on a recent episode of the Spellslinger episode that we did. Because I was like, I used to have this deck. Why did I disassemble it? I loved it. So I've rebuilt it.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. And it's Jeskai. So I love how those three colors interact. I love the white. This is the thing that I kind of found when I looked at white and green, is that white often supports what other colors are doing.
Oh, yeah.
Green often makes a deck do more green stuff than the other colors.
Yeah.
So I find that just because it's freaking Daddy Wizard's favorite child, I find that the green thing happens if the second you put in green in a deck. Like, for example, in my X Hydra deck, it always is casting big green monster spells and does the run over effects. I could do a big X black blue deck. I could do that, but it's not quite as good as, you know, it wouldn't be as good without the green making the big hydras to beat face.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And like, even like, you know, look at my elves deck. Obviously, green black elves is a big archetype, but it's realistically more green than it is black. Do you know what I mean?
It's true. I definitely see where you're coming from as someone who also plays a lot of white.
Yeah.
Like, it's also just so great to have in a commander's color identity. You get access to so much removal.
Yes.
Like, literally, you
the
can
objectively best removal as well. Like,
you get the
always
objectively best, and also, like we talked about in I think it was the best removal episode, where we talked about synergy versus efficiency when you're choosing your removal pieces. You also just get really synergistic removal often in white. Like, you get removal spells that populate. You get removal spells that, you know, like do lots of different things that your deck wants to do.
You know,
flicker removal spells. Whereas I'm completely with you. Like, I love green, but you have to love green to build a green deck. Even if it's green plus white or green plus black or whatever.
And I just don't.
Yeah.
I just don't. I'm sorry.
I respect it.
Yeah.
No, it's fair. It's definitely like green does its thing. Green does creature stuff.
The other thing that I think that green does, which always makes me feel bored, is the amount of just like really good land ramp that green has.
Yeah.
I just find like if you're in green, run the 10 green land ramp package. It's like, honestly, like I feel like if you're in a green color identity, even foregoing strategy and synergy, you could just run that and your deck will be perfect.
Yeah.
You could.
It's
and
true.
that's boring. Now you've got 34 cards to choose from, not
Yeah.
54. You know, like, it's just one of those things. It's like the second you put green in, it becomes a green deck. And that's why I think green should be removed and replaced with purple.
That was not the question, James. I'm sorry to tell you. That was a good one. Thanks, Nick. Next question comes to us from Matt. This is a very similar question. Matt asks, what magic color philosophy do you resonate with the most?
Ooh. We've done 2 philosophy episodes so far.
We have. So we've done color philosophy. Well, 3 actually, because we did color philosophy in general, and then we did white and we did blue.
And blue.
So we still have 3 of those monocolors still to go. I think when we did the white episode, I realized that white for me epitomizes my ongoing battle with perfection. In my life.
We did talk about this.
We talked about this. So,
and how like perfection isn't real, so it's always strived to get there.
Yes, and fails a
Yes.
lot. And for me, that is just like my life.
Yeah.
So like, and I'm saying this, I want to be really, really clear here. I'm not saying that my life is a pursuit of perfection. It's me chasing perfection and frequently failing, and that is exactly where we landed with white, right? It was like, white has this ideal state of like, we'll all live in harmony, and the rules will work, and together we'll win, and all this stuff, and all of those things are kind of fake, and you can't ever completely get there, but white is trying anyway, and honestly, I think that's probably roughly what kind of a person I am.
Look, it's funny, I really see what you're saying. I thought you would immediately say green because like you're very like you're very nature-based yourself as a person. You're very trust in nature and, things exist the way they are because that's the way they're best. Like, and also the harmony bit is more green, like group collectiveness is very white, but the harmonious synergy between beings is very green.
That's true.
I thought you'd say green, but I really understand what you're saying about the struggle aspect, and each color has a struggle. And that's why my identity would be red, actually, I think. Because my struggle is the red struggle of, it's not, red doesn't even see it as a struggle, and I think this is the funny thing. I don't see it as a struggle either. My life is just chaos. I'm constantly busy. I'm constantly running around. I've always got a to-do list that's the size of my arm. Like, I'm constantly running, and I feel like it's very hard for me to calm down in those, situations. I perform better with 3 cans of Monster Energy in my body than... Do you know what I mean? I feel like red is just me. It might not be who I want to be, but it is who I am.
Well, I've owned up to that as with white, honestly. Like, I don't want to be someone who constantly struggles with perfection, but it's probably who I am. Yeah, how I would describe it for you is, you're someone who juggles a lot of things, but who likes juggling.
I actually juggle too. I can juggle.
You'd rather be juggling than have 2 perfectly balanced things in your hand. You'd be like, this is boring.
Yeah.
Give me 4 more.
Throw me that apple. And the banana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see that in you, for sure.
I feel like people would assume that I would be like, I'm blue. I'm not. I like to pretend I'm blue. I like
die.
Yeah. If I was green, I would die. Yeah. I'm in need of a guy.
Yeah.
But I feel like when I pretend to be blue, I'm very much almost putting on the persona of the 10th Doctor, of this brash, confident, walking around like he knows everything, but realistically is making it the fuck up as he goes along. And that is really red.
Yeah.
Walking into a room, pretending that you know it all and just making it up, that is it. But really, you are core red.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's true. I think I would describe Is It as more red than blue. Like, we talked before about the 2 color identities and how sometimes they, the second color just enhances the other one in a way that just feels more like that color than the other.
Yeah.
And so white green feels more green than white to me, probably. And I think blue red feels more red than blue. The blue adds an element of knowledge, but it's also mostly red's chaos and and making it up, but with blues knowing a little bit, and it's being like, hey, I know everything, but mostly 4 things.
And I know those 4 things decently well.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm going to talk for 30 minutes about each of them. But I feel it's interesting because even when you look at the decks, I feel like Is It decks often have more blue cards in it.
That's
true.
The
blue cards are doing the red thing of I need to draw 1,000,000 fucking cards right now.
And when you picture a blue-red card, they look chaotic to me. They don't look blue. They look more chaotic than blue.
I think as 2 colors next to each other on a card as well, they're the most stark different. Red and blue, you think about Spider-Man's costume and how poppy it is. Red blue cards look poppy as hell.
That's true.
Whereas green white cards look like a nice outfit.
It's kind
You'd wear it a summer evening.
Oh my god. When people ask me what my favorite color identity is from now on, I'm going to say summer evening.
Summer evening. I love building summer evening decks.
Yeah. Me too. Good one. Nick asks us the next question. Pick one plane that never gets visited again and another that gets a set within the next 2 years.
Ooh.
So these, I assume both of these are planes that we have visited
know
before.
of, yeah.
Or we know of, or have been visited before.
I'd say so.
So one of these planes we're never going to visit again. The other one, we're going to give it a set within the next 2 years. So we're head of R&D. We're making the decisions. What are we never seeing again?
All right, Gavin Verhey, listen up. Never again. Okay. Very recent. New Capenna.
Oh.
I loved the idea of New Capenna, the whole gangster kind of kingpin
It's
vibes.
a cool vibe.
I don't think it played off well. I think the Magic Universe didn't utilize the vibe of Capenna well enough. I think I wouldn't be bothered if we don't go back to Capenna. I didn't relate to the families in the lore. I didn't kind of relate to the story. I liked the fact that we found out where Elspeth is from. But yeah, there was a couple of cards that were cool, like Luxador and stuff like that, but like, it was a meh set.
Yeah.
It was meh.
I respect that. And what about, what are we revisiting in the next 2 years?
I know this one for sure. Kaldheim.
Oh, yeah.
For sure, Kaldheim. This set, how many? There's like 9 realms in Kaldheim.
I think so.
There's like Kaldheim as a plane, and then there's the world tree that has the realms out of it.
It's very based on Norse mythology, and there are like multiple entire worlds. Like, this is a plane that contains planes.
A pocket universe.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Why did we not get more, like, the whole block system that Magic used to have?
So we used to have like 3 sets where we'd visit one plane. So it'd be like, Mirrodin basically
Besieged,
would have...
Mirrodin.
Mirrodin Resurgeness.
Mirrodin Remastered.
I wasn't playing then, okay?
But Kaldheim was like the perfect set to do something like that, because you could have gone like, the first set was 3 realms. Yeah. Right? And those 3 realms could have had really strong color identities linked to them. And then the next 3 could have had color identities, and the next 3 could have been like a really sick 2-color pairing set matters. I don't know. I just feel like that set did not have enough. I felt the story was mid on the set itself, and it was like, it could have been more. And the characters were so cool. And there's some creatures that I really want to revisit. Like, imagine another Orvar that isn't as busted and fun to play.
That's true. I think, so for me, this question, I am not someone who's super aware of the Magic story, as I've been embarrassingly admitting for over a year now on this podcast.
It's sad.
It is sad. But I think I completely agree with you on Kaldheim. Totally loved the flavor of the set. I loved all the sagas as well on that set.
Yeah, it's something that I loved about those sagas, just quick tangent, the artwork, how some of them were actual, like, physical wood carvings. And taken a photo, that was sick.
Well, that's, I think there's a great video from Ristic Studies. Sam from Ristic Studies does a video essay on sagas where he basically argues that I think almost all of the sagas artwork can be argued to be the interpretation of events that have occurred on a plane from the people that lived there.
Yes, like the people that lived on the plane, if they were to produce art, it would be in this style. Like the wood carvings on Kaldheim, that's how the Vikings of Kaldheim would deal with it.
Or like, how many have we seen with stained glass windows? That's
from
like,
Dominaria.
People have constructed effigies to the events of that particular plane.
Even the Theros, like how they're, like they're the paintings of warriors and stuff in that like Greek
it looks like pottery or whatever. Yeah, 100%. I mean, even just for that, I would love to see Kaldheim again, just some more sagas. I don't know where I would not have us visit again. Maybe Ravnica. Gasp.
Shock. We're going back to Ravnica next year.
Are we really?
It's Ravnica Remastered. I'm not sure if you saw that.
Remastered. I did hear people were excited about this because it's going to do similar to Dominaria Remastered.
Yes, reprint.
Where it's like, it's a reprint set, but they also are going to like meld.
Meld is a mechanic, but melge is when you take multiple sets and put them into one.
Yep. New word. Coined it right now. Melge. We're going to melge Ravnica together.
Instead of the block way of releasing sets, Walt has introduced the melge set.
And introducing Ravnica melged. Anyway, when Ravnica gets melged, I reckon that'll be cool. But
I think it's sick.
I'm a little over Ravnica just conceptually. I'm sorry. I know that people love Ravnica, but like, can we just visit like once a year, maybe, if that? Maybe once every 2 years.
Well, I feel like we've not been back to Ravnica in a long time, so Ravnica Remastered does feel well timed.
That's true.
I feel like it's fine.
Yeah.
I did want them to call it Return to Ravnica Remastered.
The classic
just the alliteration.
Return to Ravnica. Yeah, definitely.
Great question, Nick. Love that one.
100%.
All right, Jordan is asking us, do you do anything differently when deck building than you used to a year ago? Are there any specific cards that you find don't make the cut in your lists anymore that used to, either because they're too weak or because of the opposite? Interesting.
Great question. So this is basically asking how our deck building approach has changed over the last 12 months. Probably, I think Jordan asked a few questions that were like very retrospective because Jordan asked a lot of questions in our last Q&A, which was a long time ago now.
Dedicated listener. We appreciate you, Jordan.
We do appreciate you, Jordan. But basically, how have our opinions shifted? And specifically in this case, how are we building decks differently? How have you changed, do you reckon, as a deck builder?
Interestingly, I think I have specifically moved away from power in my deck building in the last... I would say this is more recent. Within the last, 6 to 8 months, I reckon I've been doing this.
Sure.
Like, my Savine deck, I specifically built it to be more casual and kind of less... I made sure that there wasn't any wacky infinite combos, or... I haven't put it into the combo checker yet. I should do that, before I buy the cards. But I think CDH, as part of my, regular commander... meal, well-balanced diet of a little bit of casual, a little bit of plane chase, a little bit of CDH. I feel like CDH has given me my scratch on playing the best that I can, playing the best lines, being objectively right.
Yeah.
I also have played a lot more Pauper recently as well, so I think that my, competitive itch has gotten out of casual commander by doing that.
Yeah.
So I've started building decks that... I think what I've been trying to do is make decks that have a lot of hoops to jump through to make them good. And it's I've talked about this on the podcast before of don't get distracted with sub-themes. But this is slightly different. I've tried to go through the thing of all right, my win con is 3 steps.
Yeah.
I have to deploy this, then I have to do this, then I win con. Not I deploy this, then I win con.
Yeah.
The typical win con of, tokens overrun. You make tokens, you overrun. 2 steps.
Yeah.
Whereas in my Savine deck, that is actually my win con. I've got a bunch of creatures that make a bunch of little 1/1s that I then cast Rally the Peasants, which is a Pauper win con.
Yes.
That has flashback, so I can buff all those tokens a lot, but it's a lot of steps to jump through. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like those win cons now are intriguing me more. I even have, for example, Scorpion God.
Yeah.
It's a -1/1 counter deck, but it's also aristocrats, which means that the value that I get from the 1/1s can only be gained if I set up the aristocrat strategy.
Yeah.
And even Tornos. Tornos is a perfect example of this. Tornos is just a bunch of trash. Build something out of it.
Yeah. 100%. I think there's something to be said. I think there's a future episode in this, and I think I've started brewing it in my head a little bit. But there's something to be said for, as a sort of advanced deck builder, someone who's built a lot of decks before, we still want to be able to have good games with people who've built new decks or with people who've built precons. There's something to be said for building a deck with the wrong commander at the helm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, true.
build the deck that does this particular thing you're interested in, but rather than playing, aristocrats, for instance, rather than playing Teysa Karlov, sorry to Teysa Karlov players out there, but that is the objectively right aristocrats deck. Commander, right? That's the best commander to have in the command zone.
Or Elenda the Dust Rose.
Yeah, it's one of those ilk.
Orzhov, good, great things,
Great aristocrats commanders in the command zone. Not criticizing those at all, but building a deck as someone who's an advanced deck builder with that as the commander, it's very difficult to not build a really strong deck because we build really good decks because we've built so many of them.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, your Marchesa deck, for example, is an aristocrats deck.
Yeah.
But you've got Marchesa at the helm, which is Monarch. It's a weird focus in the command zone, but the deck does something different. So my Scorpion God deck is a -1/1 counters deck, but it's an aristocrats deck.
Yeah.
So I could be in a Rakdos build with Garner at the helm instead.
Yeah.
That's a way better aristocrats red-black commander.
Yeah. So there's something to be said, I think, for controlling the power level of the deck that you're building by having, quote, the wrong commander in the command zone, because it will control the power of the deck. You can absolutely optimize the hell out of the 99. You're never going to completely bust it because the commander stops you from doing so.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of fun with this recently. I mean, I talk about it all the time. My Catilda and Lear Spellslinger deck.
I don't think I know this one. Is this the human type?
Yeah.
Gets jump start?
Yeah, that's you caught it.
Nice.
Yeah, no. So it's just like a bad Spellslinger commander.
Yeah.
It's trying to do two separate things that don't mesh together very well. But I've optimized the hell out of the 99. I keep on subbing cards in and out, trying to make it the best thing I possibly can. But I can't ever completely break it because the commanders aren't very good.
No.
You know?
They don't get removed, though, because they're
not. Which
is nice.
Which is second threat. Shout out to the second threat.
I do find that... I think there is an episode in this, and I think we revisit it. But we did talk a little bit about it in our recent episode called What's in a Template.
Yeah.
How we kind of talked about the different approaches you can take to building a deck. I think this is an additional approach of building
Yeah.
a deck with a commander that isn't the strategy.
Definitely.
Interesting.
100%.
Nice.
In
How's your
terms of-
deck building changed?
Yeah, good question. I'm so glad you asked me that, James. You
Actually,
personally.
it was
Yeah.
Jordan
Yeah.
that asked that. I'm just curious.
I definitely am playing less ramp. I found most of the decks that I'm building these days, I'm hovering around 8 to 10 bits of ramp instead of that sort of 10 to 15 mark that I used to have.
But you pray to Sam Black every night, so you've lowered that curve.
The curves come down a
Yeah.
lot. I've also just built decks that don't need as much ramp in them. Like they just do more in the lower mana value slots. I'm definitely playing fewer board wipes. I talked about this before. I think in the last Q&A, I was talking about how where we think Commander's going to go next in terms of cards.
Yeah,
that we
less board
play
wipes for sure.
I'm playing less board wipes. Usually, most of my decks are only playing 2. I used to play 5.
Yeah, pretty much standard. I do remember you were one of those culprit players that was like, gonna reset the game again because it's the best thing to do.
I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. It slows the game down so much. And I'm playing more card draw, definitely. More around the 15 mark. We've also talked about that recently.
Yep.
In terms of like cards, specific cards I'm not playing anymore. I'm not playing panoramas.
I never played panoramas. They've always been shit.
They've always been bad. Look, I used to follow the Commander's Quarters sort of way of building decks, and he always included panoramas. I'm like, these seem fine. They're not fine.
It's because they're like, Mum, can we have a fetch land? No, we have fetch lands at home.
Fetch lands at home, panoramas. I think that, to be honest, I wrote all of that down when I was writing notes for this episode, and I was like, that's done. And then I realized I've made a huge change to how I build my decks, which is that I've cut almost all of the tutors.
Oh, we spoke a lot about that in the Tutors v Card Draw episode.
Yeah, Tutors vs Card Draw. I talked specifically to that. But yeah, basically, most of my decks, with a few exceptions, like Gerard Golgari Marin Glanville that plays Gerard Golgari Lichlord and needs to find him, with the exception of decks like that need tutors in them.
The Glass Cannon decks.
The Glass Cannon decks.
Shout out to our Glass Cannon
episode.
God, I love these Q&As.
The vast majority of my decks are playing like one tutor, or most of them are playing no tutors at all.
Yeah.
And I've been loving playing like that.
It's interesting you say that. I, with my Savine deck that I've just recently built, there is an incredible tutor. You're not going to believe this. It's 1 in a blue. You tutor your library for 3 cards with flashback and put them into your graveyard.
You were messaging me about this, and I was like, that seems nuts.
Yeah, it's strong. But I actually took it out of the final lists. Because I was like, you know what? If that means that I get my win con immediately, and if I just have that in my opening hand, it means that I could deploy very, very fast.
Yeah.
Increasing devotion, rally the peasants, kill you.
Yeah, I mean,
It's boring. It's boring.
All the win cons, including the way to get there. Yeah.
So I took that out. I did post it up in our Discord, and there was a couple of really great people in there. Shout out to James, who was like, "Oh, you definitely should run this card," and then went, "Oh, I just checked your considering tag on Moxfield. They're all in there." It's like, yeah.
I'm aware of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Next question. This one's pretty short. It's from Nick, and it has an emoji of 2, the looking eyes.
The eyes emoji.
Yeah, the eyes emoji. And it just says, merch, ?
Eyes emoji.
Eyes emoji. I want to answer this.
Sure.
We would love to. It's most likely going to be crowdfunded. It is going to be the situation, because we're not at the point yet where we can justify ordering a backlog of merch.
No.
But I want to say, if you want to have this happen, you can support it. That's what the Patreon is there for. This is the money that we're going to be banking up and doing it. If you guys are absolutely desperate for it, there are ways that we can do it sooner rather than later. But you got to let us know that you want it.
Yeah.
If you want it, jump in the Discord, tweet about it, share it on Instagram, go down to your local game store and just yell, "Get Commanded should have a t-shirt." Because we would genuinely love to do it. But Walt and I are too... I'm going to say we're responsible business owners. And we're looking at the involvement of doing this, and it's quite a lot of effort. We got to get it designed, we got to get samples, and it's not a cheap and quick process. We'd have to spend quite a bit of money to do this.
Yeah.
And then we'd have to think, okay, well, now we have to crowdfund it, and if we don't reach a certain point, we can't order a minimum set of t-shirts, for example, that would justify doing it. So then you guys would be getting it for a hella discounted price.
Yeah.
And it's very confusing. And I've done it before for other businesses where I've had to do this, but I would love to, and
Yeah.
I've actually thought about some merch ideas that we could do.
Sure.
I think one of the coolest ones is basically a card on the front of your t-shirt, and it can be like a template of a card, and it could just say "and it's and then on the back of the shirt, land on the back for
that's
MDFCs.
pretty funny.
I thought that would be pretty
great.
sick.
I love that a lot.
I thought "It's time to get commanded" would be really cool on like sleeves or something like that.
It's very comic booky. You could have like "It's time to" in small writing, and then the big
Get commanded.
Yeah.
I also really like the idea of having a playmat that is like, you know, when you buy a piece of IKEA furniture, like we've done before in the past, and they've got those cartoons of how to build it.
Oh.
I would love those cartoons being like 10 bits of card draw, 10 bits of ramp on a playmat. How sick would that look?
That's actually so fun.
I think it's really cute. And like a white playmat, how sick would that look? Like the white and black sketches?
You know what you could also do is you could lay it out in such a way that when people are building, they can put them on the columns. Like have the little
like a
card
deck building
outlines.
playmat?
Like a thing, then you
sick.
can have like a card draw section and then like a ramp and then removal, and then people could literally be like, all right, pull out my Get Commanded template playmat, lay out the stuff. That's really
love
fun.
that. We'd have to call Moxfield and be like, hey, yo, do you want your logo on this playmat as well?
Yeah, top left corner, open up moxfield.com. Yeah,
I also think I died to twiddle would be a fun one.
Sure.
That's a shout out.
4 people who've died to twiddle.
It's a shout out to one of our good friends who's been on this podcast, Cooper Stubbs, that lost a game to Walt's twiddle.
Yep. I cast twiddle on my Arami to untap it and cast it again, and Cooper just immediately said, I can't believe I just died to twiddle.
But yes, short answer, we would love to.
Absolutely.
If you guys want to see it, let us know, like, be vocal about it. And yeah, if it's something that Walt and I this afternoon talk about and like, go, right, this could be a real possibility, then yeah, we would love to do it. It would be hella crowdfunded and you guys would be along with us for the journey. But I feel like that's the Get Commanded way of doing things.
Yeah.
You guys are part of this podcast, so you're going to be part of it. We'll ask you what you want to see on merch.
Yeah.
Very, very collaborative process for sure.
Drop us a line. Let us know what you want to see. Definitely. Next question comes to us from Ben. Ben says, why do we spread out the damage when attacking? Is it not a better play to try and kill a single player?
Interesting.
That's a good question. I think there's an argument to be said here for keeping everyone's life totals in check. I think
like keeping everyone within range.
Yeah, I think it's really like, I've gotten to the end of games before where often it happens when someone has some incidental life gain, right? Like Authority of the Consoles, for instance, will just gain so much life over the course of the game. Yeah, a Soul Sister effect. Even having like a propaganda or something, just dissuading attacks.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get to the end of a game, everyone's got a very developed board, the means to kill a player, and then you look around and go like, wow, I can kill any player on the board except James, who is at 40 life. And it's a problem. Like you get to a point where it's like, wow, even if we all gang up resources, we probably can't kill James before he kills us. That is a problem in a casual game. And so I think there's a really strong argument for actually keeping everyone's life totals within range is what I would say. So not wailing on one person, also not like always spreading the damage, but just making sure there's no one whose life total is getting silly, because you might just never get there, you know, with that player.
And then you might have to really think about like alternative win cons, like can I get commander damage through on this player?
It becomes a more difficult problem to solve, for sure. I think the other thing that I'll say, and this is more of a Get Commanded message, is no one likes sitting around waiting for the game to end. Like if you die first in a game of Commander...
And you have to spectate for like 20 minutes.
Well, and sometimes you have to spectate for like 40 minutes or an hour if it's a casual game. It's not much fun. Obviously, you could, if you're at a game store, you could wander off and come back. But most of the time, you want to get a game in with the same pod you just played with anyway.
Yep.
So I think there's an argument for not killing people for that reason. And also, I will shout out my friend James here and say that having lethal combat damage on someone is a great politics opportunity.
I was so curious where you were going with that, but I do that a lot.
Yeah, it's a really, like, you have the absolute best leverage you can have. You have the means to say...
Do you want to keep playing?
Do you want to keep playing? I can end your game right now, or let's pull some resources together.
Yeah.
You might have a stronger chance of winning that game. Like, again, if we apply the spike lens for a second, you might have a stronger chance of winning that game in the long run by keeping that player alive and using them as your tool.
Well, I was going to add the exact same spike lens of of being like, killing one player might then make you target numero uno for removal.
Yeah.
Which means you die on the crackback. That, like, the crackback of an attack is so real. And that's why I think people in Commander generally hold up blocks more often than swing, because there's 3 opponents.
Yeah.
So you need to block more than you need to attack in Commander. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas in 1v1, you need to block just as much as you need to attack because you've got one opponent.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you, Ben, about how you're saying, is it better to try and kill a player? Because we've constantly talked about ending the game. And I think if you're not taking a very clear opportunity to kill a player when you can and not die on the crackback and not suffer the ramifications of what we were just talking about, do it.
Yeah.
Kill that player.
Oh, yeah.
They deserve to die.
Yeah.
They are your enemy. Like,
it's true. Eventually the game does have to end.
Yes.
And I think there are people who I'm aware of who could learn this lesson, which is to say that, like, okay, if you have the means to kill a player, you know, you've got like 30 damage in the air, start killing players. Because you could end the game in 2 turns, but if you start going like, oh, I'll share the damage around, you're just prolonging a game that you're probably going to win anyway.
Yeah. I agree. It was a good one though, Ben. I really like how the fact that you're identifying a very get commanded struggle of ending the game but being fun. I appreciate that.
There was a really, really funny thing where Ben sent through like 5 different questions and then sent through a follow-up message where he was like, all of this is coming from me, who is a very high-powered player. I'd like more people to play in a more high-powered way.
You're trying to influence them.
Yeah, it's like the leading questions, basically, from Ben. But no, they're really good questions, and I appreciate them. But it's just funny. Ben was like, I'm outing myself. I am a high-powered player.
That's
but
funny.
Come on, guys. Let's end this goddamn game already.
You know what? Ben, this is a dialogue. Feel free to give your opinions back to us.
For sure. Drop them in the Discord.
Jump in the Discord, for sure.
100%. Well, we've answered a lot of questions already. We've got a few more, though. I think we should take a thrifty interlude.
A thrifty interlude. A little break that won't break the bank.
That's a good
catchphrase.
one.
I just kind of said it and went, oh, that could go on merch.
The merch is writing itself.
Take a break. Take a Thrifty Thursday.
Nice.
We probably can't do that.
No, we can absolutely not do that. So we have lots of questions left to answer. But before that, we're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card. So as is tradition, I will be performing a monologue. And this week, it's the cowled merchant with some new wares in the market of good ideas.
Our good interplanar salesman.
Yes, salesman, friend, everything. This is my best friend. Yes, she's a unicorn. No. This episode, I'd to read the card I'm featuring this week.
I definitely would, because it's got one of my favorite mechanics, and definitely a mechanic that should be reprinted into the ground. This is Empty the Warrens. For 3 and a red, you'll get a sorcery that says create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. I just love goblin. No. It also has Storm.
Ever wanted to know exactly how many goblins could fit in a hole? The answer is, it depends. Could be 2 or 10 or 48. There's just no way of knowing how deep those holes go, like an ant nest. And like an ant nest, don't bloody step on the hole, because you'll find out. You haven't been this frightened of an evacuation since probably your last evacuation. Unless it was one of those practice ones. No, Mr. Bossman, I don't want to stand next to a sign that says emergency meeting point. I just want friends who are goblins. Is that too much to ask? If it is, I don't want to work here. Unless this is one of those things that you can get with collective bargaining. In which case, I'm joining a union. Get budgeted!
I love how, like, if you really read, like, the last, like, nearly 100 Thrifty Thursdays, you could really get a political compass of Walt's opinions.
Yeah, look, sometimes it comes through subtly, and most of the time it comes through not at all subtly.
No.
The nose.
I've got a question about Thrifty Thursdays lore. Where does the cowled merchant possibly works in an office, a building?
He has before. He's lived many lives, I think.
Or he could be many people.
He could indeed. Speaking of Thrifty Thursdays, you can see them as they come out in text form every Thursday in our Discord server in the Thrifty Thursdays channel. And you can also see us bring some of these to life in video form over on TikTok at get commanded. So follow us on there to see those as they come out.
Alrighty, we've got a ton more questions to get to, so we're just going to jump back in.
Sure.
Let's just go straight into it.
Let's do it.
No impressive segue. Brad is asking, why are people so afraid of CEDH staples? A lot of them scale pretty terribly in Casual Commander. Dockside Extortionist is a lot worse when people are playing less mana rocks and more land ramp, for example. Orcish Bowmasters doesn't kill almost anything in a casual game. Mystic Remora draws far fewer cards when people are playing creature decks.
Great question,
Yeah.
Brad. I think I can definitely speak to this as someone who doesn't have a lot of money. It's really
Fair
important.
enough, fair enough.
But seriously, these are signposts of a strong deck, and specifically a deck that has staples in it. So I agree, most of those CEDH-ish staples, I think Dockside is one that bridges the gap into casual a lot better than maybe you're giving it credit for here. But I think definitely Orcish Bowmasters, Mystic Remora, I totally agree. They don't scale very well with casual decks. Probably people are overreacting when they see them, but as someone who plays against a lot of people I don't know a lot when I go to different game stores and stuff, if I sit down in a game and I feel like we're sort of roughly at the same power level and someone's dropping, staples of our format like Mystic Remora or like Dockside or like Orcish Bowmasters.
Mana Crypt even?
Well, Mana Crypt is just great in every level
Yeah.
of the game, I would say. Whereas Brad's sort of talking about ones that are not good in CDH, I think. Oh,
Or
only
ones-
good in CDH.
Only good in CDH.
Yeah, but to me, when I see these cards in a game, the cards themselves, I agree, are not that worrisome, but they indicate to me that this person is someone who has probably spent a lot of money on the deck, who has probably built a very, very strong deck, right? Like, they're building with staples in them. They might have other staples that do scale with casual really well, like Smothering Tithe, like Path to Exile, like Swords to Plowshares. Like, these are the best cards in our format,
Even like
full stop.
the free interaction spells are the ones that I think scale really strongly in casual.
They're just always good in Commander.
I agree.
So for me, as someone who's played against decks like this before, I agree. I think people overreact to the cards themselves, but they're probably reacting also to the idea behind someone having those cards in their deck,
and
which
what
is
it could
like,
mean for the rest of the deck.
yeah, it's kind of like going like, okay, like if I'm seeing Mystic Remora, is there a Heuristic Study in this deck? Because that card scales super well in Casual Commander.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. I agree on the basis that there are cards that are CDH staples that are just almost bad in casual. Like Orcish Bowmasters was one that Brad specifically called out there. I agree. It's pretty terrible in casual.
Yeah.
It's like it becomes a bad Niv Mizzet Perun.
I mean, yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I think that you're right. It pings a couple of damage here and there, and if you're playing into that strategy, maybe it could be strong, but you have to be building around it, whereas in CDH, it could be just in any black deck and get you enough value, because the meta of CDH is most of the creatures can be killed by a couple of pings.
Yeah.
So I think that, you're totally right. That one was a good call out. I do think, though, that there are some CDH staple cards that even in a casual game can just, shift the tide pretty effectively.
Yeah.
I think Dockside, you said it before, I don't think there's enough credit given here where Dockside is just really powerful.
Yeah.
Even in a casual game, I think that...
It's 1 in a red,
It's
right?
1 in a red. You're always probably going to go up on mana.
Yeah. If this only makes you 5 treasures in a casual game, you've still paid 1 in a red for 5 mana of any color that you can bank. It's not even a ritual. Like, it's better than a card that says, pay 1 in a red, create 5 mana of any color. It's better than that because you can just hold it. You can just wait and then use the treasures later. Like, it's still extremely strong.
It's also a creature, can become flickered, come back, and I think decks that do play it often utilize it in that way.
Yeah.
I had Dockside in my old Brutaclad list because it made treasures.
Oh, it was so good in that deck
and it was interesting because it was even stronger in a casual game because it made treasures that could be turned into 2/2 flyers or whatever like that.
100%.
I think I'm also thinking specifically, I had a discussion about this recently. I run Ad Nauseam in my Zaxara deck.
Do you really?
I do, because it's actually fucking phenomenal, because when you reveal the card, it's X and 1 green.
Yeah.
So it's 1. You lose 1 life. So you can draw 15, 20 cards.
And the amount of cards you're getting into your hand, you're cheating the value, basically, right?
Sure.
Pull from Tomorrow is a card you're never going to cast for 1 or even 2. You're going to be casting it for X equal to 5, pay 7 mana or whatever.
Yeah.
But it dinks you for 2 when you reveal it. That's pretty fun.
It is really cool, and I just think it can, with the times I've resolved it, I've gone, oh wow, shifted the game quite heavily. I've now got so much extra mana and so much extra cards and things to do and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I think a deck that just has staples in it doesn't mean it's more powerful. Like my Zaxara build, just if it casts ad nauseum, it's not winning off ad nauseum.
No.
It's not an ad nauseum deck like in CDH. It's using it for value. It's powerful value. It's good value. But it doesn't mean that it's a powerful deck. My Zaxara deck plays at a really nice, fair, kind of interaction combat battle cruisery deck. But it runs Adnors. And Brad's totally right. Just because it has Adnors doesn't mean it's busted.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying here, Brad, and I think that the reason why people are scared of it is because of the potential behind it.
Yeah.
I think if I like turn 2'd, I don't know, like Ristic Study, people go, oh my god, that's like a powerful card, that's a powerful deck. Or even if I put like, you know, an Orcish Bowmasters, but I only put it in the deck because I want to generate a token that I can sacrifice to aristocrats.
Yeah.
That's not the reason it's run in CDH, but it's the reason it's run in this deck. But people get scared of it because they've heard all of these things of like, oh, it's really good in this CDH list. I think it's like the potential behind a staple is the reason people get scared of it.
100%. And I think it's worth noting, like, I agree with you that having like one-off staples or a couple of staples in a deck doesn't inherently make it a powerful deck. But, you know, if you have 5 or 6 staples or even like 10 staples that are really, really good in a deck, that deck is just stronger for having those staples in it.
Especially cards like Mana Crypt, for example.
Oh,
That's just always really strong.
That might be a turn 2 commander for you now.
Yes.
That would have previously been a turn 5 commander.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Good question.
Yeah, great question. Next question comes to us from Jordan. Jordan asks, what's the most interesting way you've had a game end in the past year?
Oh, good one. I think I've spoken about this on the podcast already, but recently we had a game of kitchen table at my place, and we had a friend of ours, Stella, around. And there was basically, I think the situation was a Psychosis crawler was on her battlefield, and she'd drawn enough cards to kill us all on the stack.
Yeah, on the stack she was drawing, I think, like 38 cards.
Yeah, so she was about to draw them. So the triggers for Psychosis Crawler weren't on the stack, but the card draw was.
Yes.
And in response to that, I cast Runaway Together, which is one of the stupidest removal spells, but brilliant in my Ukima Kazar deck.
You basically choose 2 creatures that are controlled by different players, and you return them to their owner's hand.
So I bounce Ukima, which triggers Ukima's ability to make someone lose life and I gain life.
Yep.
And I also bounce Psychosis Crawler. And as a result of that, I think Stella just decked herself from memory and killed herself like on the stack where she was trying to win on the stack.
She drew all the cards, and I think she had like 5 cards left in her library.
Yeah.
But the game went long enough that eventually she just drew from an empty library. Yeah.
That was so satisfying. Runaway Together, a common from Eldraine.
I know.
Mwah.
Card's actually really good in my humans deck as well.
Oh, because it bounces a human back.
Bounces a human,
That's
so you
sick.
can cast it again. Yep, for sure. For me, the one that stands out the most, we talked about it before, but the Patreon game that we played
With Fletcher.
I think it was our first Patreon game as well.
It was, first ever one.
We were playing at plenty of games in Melbourne. And yeah, the Rakdos charm for the win. Well, Fletcher, it was a combination of things. Fletcher basically politicked to convince someone to swing at other people, made the perfect deal that was something like,
I won't swing at you.
I won't swing at you for 2 turns.
This also, can I make a point? This highlights our space battle episode where I said it's all in the fine print.
Yes.
This is a brilliant example of the fine print.
This was so noteworthy and fun of a standout example.
I'll
accept it. I'll accept this one. Because basically it forced Cooper, who was the other player in this game, besides me, James, and Fletcher, to swing out at me and James. We died, and then before Cooper's turn even ended, Fletcher just Rakdos charmed, so that all those creatures that Cooper had dealt damage to him, 1 damage for each creature he controlled. He was on like 12, he had 15 creatures, he died on the stack. And Fletcher got around it.
So good.
I didn't swing at you, you know?
Yeah. And honestly, I'm so glad. I think that was a really good play as well, because that game also went for like nearly 3 hours.
Yeah.
And we were just like so happy to see it end.
Yeah, and it was a really good, like, satisfying end to the game.
It was.
I think the other one for me that I had semi-recently, and just stands out to me because I think I played it right, which was I was kind of like semi-behind. It wasn't immediately obvious that I was in a very good position, and every single turn I was basically doing almost nothing except using Mimic Vat to cast Captain of the Guard. which was tucked under Mimic Vat, which is the 6-mana creature. It's a 3/3. Gives other soldiers you control +1/+1 in vigilance. And when it ETBs, you make 3 soldiers.
Oh, okay.
So I was doing that every single turn, so making more and more soldiers. And then on my last turn that I had, I cast Song of the World Soul, which says whenever you cast a spell, populate.
Oh, God.
And so then I Mimic Vatted out the Captain of the Guard. The Captain of the Guard is a token because of Mimic Vat. And then I just cast 3 more spells.
And populated the Captain of the Guard?
Captain of the Guard.
Holy hell.
So all my soldiers were 5/5s with vigilance.
Oh
and I had
God.
4 Captain of the Guards. The tokens have haste because of Mimic Vat. Yeah, it was a really cool end to the game where I basically didn't do almost anything for 3 or 4 turns, really flew under the radar, and then just played it the right way.
Yeah.
It was satisfying.
That's one of those watch out kind of...
Randy Orton! Yeah, exactly right.
I'm so glad you got that reference.
I did
That was
get that reference. Next question comes to us from Nick. This is a really simple one. Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile?
2 of what we've called them out as the objectively best removal spells in our format.
For sure. I'm guessing that Nick is asking here, what is the strongest of those 2? What's the better card?
Or just... What do we prefer? Or
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's up to interpretation.
It is
Swords
for sure.
or Path?
I think I'm going to choose to answer this from the perspective of casual because it's a different question probably for CDH.
Sure.
You're usually playing both in CDH anyway. I think in casual that the life gain is less relevant than an extra land. I'll say usually less relevant than an extra land.
How many times have you heard someone go, if I had 1 more mana?
Yeah, well, it's true, because the land, I think, especially if it's turn 5 or 6, giving someone 1 more mana is actually pretty substantial in terms of what it might do to their next couple of turns. Whereas, I think it depends on the board. If you're having to sword something that's a 12/12, giving someone 12 life is pretty bad for you. But I would say the usual amount of life that someone gains off of Swords to Plowshares in a casual game is probably 5 or 6.
Yep.
I don't think gaining 5 or 6 life is going to be the turning point in a game, whereas I do think giving someone an extra mana will be, most likely. So for me, I would say Swords is usually the stronger choice. But they're both such great spells.
Fair enough. I'm going to go one step further and say that Swords in the early game is better, and Path in a late game is better.
That makes sense.
I think by turn 7, if you're pathing something, that mana is...
less relevant.
Negligible. It's people have already ramped, people have already got all the mana they need, they're probably using everything anyway.
They might have 15 mana at that point.
Yeah, I don't think it's important late game, but early game... Getting swords on something is just okay, sure. A few people have swung 2/2s around, getting 4 or 5 life back is negligible as well. So, but late game, swordsing something and giving people life could be game swinging, but a path in the early game could mean someone could accelerate ahead quicker.
Gotcha.
So I'm saying,
I like that. I definitely agree. I think by the time you're getting to those late turns where you might have lethal on somebody, swordsing a creature they control might stop you from killing them that turn.
Yeah.
And that's massive.
Yeah.
But they're both so good. You really can't go wrong.
Good question. I like it. It was short, sharp, to the point.
Yeah.
All right, we've got another one here from Ben. Should there be more land hate played against green decks? If no, should we play less artifact hate, or should green just get land ramp for free? Oh, this is interesting because I feel like what you're trying to say here, kind of in the subtext of this, is why is there artifact hate? Because that's my ramp in a Grixis deck.
But green gets
can
to
just
ramp
get it.
And nothing ever happens. We know no one ever really blows up lands in casual.
I'm with you, Ben. As a Grixis player myself, I'm right there. But this is a pretty juicy question. I think I've advocated pretty heavily on this podcast and just in store and everywhere else that you should have a way of destroying a target land or permanent in your deck all the time. Because there are problematic lands are very problematic.
Yeah, there are... In your Tornos deck, you very, very frequently flip Storm the Vaults into a land that is banned in Commander. The regular version of the land is Tolarian Academy. But it flips into a legendary land that taps for blue for each artifact you control. That is banned for a reason. It's an extremely strong effect.
Also in that deck, I have Manamo, School at Water's Edge.
Yeah,
and also another really powerful land.
Extremely strong. But if you don't have a card like Beast Within or Generous Gift or something of that nature, you're not going to be able to deal with that land.
And I think that every deck should have a way of dealing with a problematic land that comes up. And I say at least one, because then in a pot of 4, there are 4 people that can deal with a problematic land.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's most likely going to get removed if it is really problematic, or there's multiple removals of these kind of problematic lands. But I know that wasn't your question because you were talking about like hate on the land ramp. And I get what you're saying because I actually said, I think in the last episode of the Q&A, I said that balance, the banned card balance, wasn't as bad as other land destruction cards because it brings everything down to even.
It's true. Maybe they can print a new version of balance
that sacrifices just lands down to...
Or maybe just costs more. Maybe it's like a 5 mana sorcery that says each player sacrifices lands until they control the same amount as the player with the fewest lands. I think...
And just leave out the creatures.
Yeah, leave out everything else. So it's at that rate, you're not going to be like breaking the game, I don't think, for 5 mana. Like that's a typical Wrath rate in white.
Well, like Destructive Force is 5 mana and that sacrifices 5 lands. Every player sacrifices 5 lands.
Yeah. I think Destructive Force is 7, I think.
7 mana?
I'm pretty sure.
Maybe.
So 5... Yeah, I think I'd be fine with that. 5 mana balance, but only for lands. I think that would be a good spell for the format. I'm going to go out on a limb and say...
Walt's custom making a land destruction spell for the good of the format. You heard it here
not
first,
for the good
people.
of the format. Not for the good of the format. For Gavin Verhey, so he can print it for the good of the format.
I love it. I think you've also mentioned Confounding Conundrum before in this conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting card that says it basically, if a land enters the battlefield and it wasn't like played for turn,
No, it's just if it wasn't the first land. So if every land after the first, that player bounces a land to their hand. So
yes, because it still hates on like Azusa and Exploration.
Yeah.
But essentially, the reason why I think this is not too bad is because it still triggers landfall. So if you're in a land-based deck because you're wanting to land ramp for landfall triggers, you can still do that, but you have to then play strategically around, okay, I'm going to be playing out on curve and I'm not going to be able to play my 8, 9, 10 mana green behemoth bombs early game. I think it's interesting. You could also go into thinking like repeatable effects like strip mine loops, where you can play a strip mine from graveyard with like a Crucible of Worlds or a Raminap Excavator. I think they're fine. I think especially like, you know, for example, if you're playing a Muldrotha deck and you have strip mine, that's a great way of like keeping the land ramp player in check. However, this is kind of like especially with like if you are playing Azusa or Exploration effects, this is one of those tricky moments where you could slip and fall down a hill and you're giving someone a clock because you're like, in 5 turns you will have no lands left. and like you could be on 5 lands already and just over your next 3 turns strip mine 3 times with Azusa and Exploration.
Yeah.
And then a player has nothing and then they're out of the game.
Yeah.
That's a slippery slope and that feels bad, but I feel fine with seeing a strip mine in to keep that, you know, mono green Omnath player that's just generated 30,000 mana in check. I think that's totally fair. And I'm going to say, if you're playing that against me and I'm playing like my Firelaf land ramp deck and you're destroying some of my lands, that's fine. That's part of my strategy. I now need to figure out a way to get over that line. I'm okay with that as land destruction, but if you're strip mine looping and blowing up everyone's lands and leaving them with nothing, that feels bad.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I would just add that specifically, I was thinking about what you said at the beginning, which is you think there should be ways to deal with lands in pretty much everyone's deck, right? Problematic lands. They have printed arguably the best version of the kind of Ghost Quarter style effect. In my opinion, this is the most playable casual version of this. So it's a colorless land. This is printed in Brothers War. It's called Demolition Field.
Oh, I've seen this.
Yeah.
This is really good.
This is like far better than every other version of this card. Basically, it taps for a colorless, but you can also pay 2 generic, tap it, and sacrifice it. Destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. That land's controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. You may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So this is a really fair version of the effect where they get 1 land, like everyone involved in the exchange gets the same amount of lands they had. You're sacking a land to get a land, they're losing a land to get a land.
But they get rid of their Cabal Coffers.
Yeah. You deal with the problematic land. Taps for colorless, doesn't come in tapped. Like you can put this in so many 1 or 2 color decks could be playing just a 1 of this card. Yeah. Most of the time it's just going to sit in your mana base. You're just going to tap it for mana. Every now and then someone's going to play a problematic land and you're going to be like, wow, I'm so glad I have this on my battlefield.
Yeah, I think there's definitely 2 sides that we've discussed here. It's the problematic lands where your deck should be equipped to deal with one of them, whether it's with the Demolition Field, a generous gift, whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's also the hating on land ramp, which can be dealt with in some creative ways, and I think is okay as long as you're not doing the I'm going to leave you with nothing in 3 turns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one.
Cool.
Yeah. Next question comes to us from Adam. Adam asks, what non-humanoid magic creature type would you want to be and why? I'm going to stick with where we were in the Thrifty interlude and say goblin!
Yeah, fair.
They have the most fun. I just
Yeah.
want to be a freaky little weirdo, and they are the most freaky little weirdos in Magic's planes, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They are. I've heard Spice 8 Rack say that all goblins can be sorted into, I think it was 3 categories. I can only remember 2 of them right now, which is little bastards and little guys. I think were 2 of the like cute little guys and freaky little bastards. I think were 2 of the.
That sounds very Spice 8, right?
It
As a
does.
way of like...
Anyway, I love goblins. I played a goblin in a D&D campaign, and it was an absolute, well, multiple D&D campaigns actually. Dirk Dorg, the 58-year-old goblin.
Yeah. I've
It's
seen
just
this guy before.
it's fun being a freak. That's what I'll say.
I'm not shocked. I also miss your Cranko deck for this reason, because you used to get absolutely like doe-eyed about the arts on so many of your goblin cards
Yeah.
in that deck. Yeah, I see that. Look, I'm going to argue that goblins are kind of humanoid though.
Oh,
They're like-
I kind
Because
of
the question,
that.
if you look, it says non-humanoid.
Oh, I fully read that as non-human. Right,
That's fair, but goblins are humanoid.
That's true.
So-
Okay. So maybe they're asking like, yeah.
Yeah, because like my immediate response was a homunculus. You know,
Okay,
like the curious
yeah.
homunculus in the library.
it.
I just love those arts.
But those
that's
are humanoid.
humanoid.
Okay.
So with that in mind, I'm gonna say I'd be a squirrel. Because
Alright.
I think it's the most supported non-humanoid type in Magic to exist. So you've got like a lot of teammates. You and 14 of your other best friends can take down an interdimensional world eater.
True.
You just need 15 of you, and then it's dead.
You know what? I think I'm going to change mine then, now
Yeah.
that I know what the question was asking.
Non-humanoid.
I think I want to be a worm.
A worm?
A worm. W-U-R-M, worm.
Not W-O-R-M.
No,
Just
very
eating mulch
different.
all day.
Worms are sick. They just break shit. They're
always
glide around
bursting out
underwater.
of
Yeah,
something.
bursting. They're also little freaks. No, they're not. They're big freaks. Much better.
Your like criteria of non-humanoid is, does it tick the freak box?
Yes.
I'm in.
Ticks the freak box. Is weird. Yep. We're
Yeah.
gonna be a worm. Everyone.
Alright, so Walter Worm, I'm a squirrel. There you go. Commission fan art for that. Go for your life.
Oh, gosh. All right, next question comes to us from Troy. Troy asks, what should people just get over in Commander? Whether it be cards, gameplay styles, rules, or anything else. What do you
Ooh.
reckon?
This is a tough one. I think that land destruction, funnily enough, is one of the things that I think people should just get over a little bit.
I assume you mean single
target,
land.
yeah,
Okay.
not like mass land destruction. If you're
No.
if you're strip mine looping everyone down to 0 lands,
Sure.
I'm getting cranky at that.
Mhm.
I'm not having fun. But if you strip mine me because I've ramped like 13 mana ahead of everyone else,
Mhm.
I'm not going to get mad at that. And I think people should get over, you know, like you've got a Cabal Coffers. We're 1 exsanguinate away from death.
Mm.
We need to get rid of that. I'm going to pop it. Don't get mad. You were about to win.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have got mad if I killed something on your, like a creature that said, I win in 2 turns.
Mm.
Don't get mad at the land destruction.
Yeah.
I think land destruction is something that people need to get over a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
These are like hot takes. I don't want to sound like too rude,
Yeah.
but I also think losing and like losing by like bad luck sometimes as well.
Yeah.
We talked about getting tilted at the first half of this episode. I think that getting tilted over luck is, in my opinion, a little bit anti-productive because I've talked about this quite a bit. I get tilted when I misplay. I get really angry because I know that I could have done better, and that's not angry at anyone else, it's angry at myself. But I think when you're like mana screwed or landlocked or like some, you know, like getting flooded, whatever, and that like it is infuriating, but I think being infuriated at that is just like shouting at the universe, why are you so unfair?
Yeah.
Like,
It's not going to do anything.
No,
for
it doesn't
you.
do anything.
It's not worth getting hung up on.
and sometimes I think that it's a bit of a message from your deck. Hey, are you running enough lands? Like, you should maybe investigate it or something instead of just getting mad, being like,
True.
I never draw enough lands.
Yeah.
How many are you running? 12.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
fuck.
There's luck, and then there's the things you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the consequences of my own actions.
Exactly right. I think for me, it's probably a bit of a weird one. I think people need to get over the way that the people need to get over casual players. I hear so many people, even in this Q&A, people have been so hung up on the things that people, I see this all the time on the EDH subreddit. People need to play more removal. People need to be interacting more. People need to be giving better rule zeros. It's like, can we acknowledge that sometimes people just don't know? Some people just don't know yet. And the best way for you to lead them out of it is to like gently guide them, not like berate them for the decisions that they're making or go online and whinge about it with a bunch of online weirdos as well. I think we just need to get over the idea as well that there's something that needs to be fixed about casual battlecruiser magic. Keep in mind, we know, because Wizards of the Coast have done statistics on this, most people are playing Commander. Most people are playing Commander casually at their kitchen table, okay? Like,
not in game stores.
Not in game stores, not highly optimizing their decks. I say this as someone who highly optimizes my decks, and probably saying this to myself as well. We need to get over the idea that there's something broken with those Commander players out there.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate way to play. You've got to respect it, because that's most of the people out there playing Commander. And they're not doing anything wrong by not playing the best versions of every effect and building the best possible decks.
Yep. I think that's a very Get Commanded message as well. Get Commanded, formed... this is a bit of an insight here and a good tangent to this question. We kind of started this podcast because we wanted to make the casual Commander experience at our store a bit more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Because people were freaking out about different things and feeling like the format was broken. And I think the Get Commanded mission statement at the very beginning was, we want to help the casual players in our store. Yeah. We've grown to much more than that, but that's where it's born.
It's definitely the origins. Yeah. We stand for the little guys.
Yeah.
Speaking of the little guys...
What a segue!
The next...
Oh my god! You did a good segue!
The next question comes to us from Brad, who asks, what is your favourite ant?
Speaking of the little guys, man, well done.
Thank you.
And yeah, great question, Brad. What's our favourite ant?
It's obviously Agitator Ant.
The Thrifty Thursdays All-Star.
Thrifty Thursdays All-Star goads things in your end step, puts counters on them. He's angry. They're angry. They're ants. They're snake ants. That's, a reference to the Thrifty Thursdays. No, I think this is a reference to our stream that we did where we went on a tangent because Fletcher, our patron who also tunes into our streams, loves ants. I love ants. I will give a proper answer specifically for Fletcher. My favourite ant is probably the giant bull ant. Are
these the ones that we get in Australia as well? They're huge.
Well, I think all bull ants are Australian, actually. It's an Australia exclusive group of ants. They're considered primitive ants because they have not developed some of the things that, quote, more advanced, They're closer to the historical ancestor of all ants than some of the other ants we get overseas that have sort of evolved
like primitive
further.
Ants.
Yeah, they're quite primitive in that they have quite small colonies. They're quite large themselves, and they are sort of quite independent. They don't necessarily rely on other workers. They kind of go out on their own. They're like, I'm going to go find some food today and bring it back. That's their mission, whereas most other ants
They're the barbarian class of ants.
Basically. Anyway, I love giant bull ants because if you look up footage of them, and specifically there's a great YouTube channel called Ants Australia, or maybe Australian Ants or something.
You are so fucking nerdy.
I know. There's a fantastic series he does where he features a colony that he has of ants, and he filming them, and there's a hilarious bit where he's like, it's very difficult to film these ants because their eyesight is so good that the second you remove the cover on their nest, they just look at you and threaten you. So there's all this footage of him
doing the old-timey, alright man, stick them up, I got the fisticuffs going on.
Great time for us to have a camera for this, but basically they have these massive jaws that they spread really wide and then look up at the camera and they make threatening, basically the come at me bro, thing of going
what? Step to me,
come on, bring it, like that. It's hilarious footage. I love them.
We need a camera for this podcast.
They're so goofy.
My favourite ant? Ant-Man.
Nice.
Yeah, Paul Rudd's a goofy guy. Yeah. Like Ant-Man.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know ants.
Technically correct.
I guess, the giant bull ants I don't fucking know. The fact that this has become a thing on the Get Commanded podcast, I'm so out of this joke. I feel like this is an inside joke for you, Brad, and Fletcher, and I'm just like, Okay, cool.
I don't even know if Brad knows what he's asking for. I think Brad was just like, it's
so
funny
enjoying
to ask.
it.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Next question is about Magic the Gathering. It comes to us from Ben, who asks, you often talk about thrifty cards and finding the right cards for your deck. But do you two have any pet cards that you almost always include in the decks you build?
Yeah, I actually had to look at my deck lists for this one. Pretty much every green deck I have runs Hunter's Insight.
Oh, this card's great. This is the instant for 2 and a green.
2 and a green, and whenever target creature you control next deals damage to a player, you draw that many cards.
It's a great combat trick.
It's so good, and I love that stuff. I'm like, go to combat swing, no blocks, before damage, and they freak out, and you're like, no, you're still taking 5, but I'm drawing 5.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's also it's always really, really good rate, and it also always fits in a green deck. Green decks always have a creature that wants to swing. It feels good all the time.
It's rarely out of place.
Yeah, I think that I don't really have pet cards in, like, all decks. I think that was the one that I saw. I found that I have cards in a deck that I call the pet card of that deck. But because I try and make the decks so independent and different from one another, I don't have a lot of opportunity to transport cards. Like, if I already have, like, a Grixis Big Spells deck, I don't have another Grixis Big Spells decks that port over. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So...
We're definitely both people who like to build decks that are unlike decks we already own.
Yes.
We're sort of the opposite of that player who keeps making token decks, or that player who keeps making, that same kind of decks.
That's wrong. You always manage to make tokens in your decks.
But I will say, you're totally right. But I will say, I try and have the actual strategy around the tokens be different. You know what I mean?
The overall, what the deck wants to do is vastly different from another token deck.
So like my Reese deck is a tokens deck, but has a flicker sub-theme. Like the main way I'm making tokens is creatures that enter the battlefield and make tokens. Got a bunch of flicker effects in there. That's the strategy of that deck. But then I have like my Wart the Raid Mother deck is a goblins deck. So yes, it makes goblin tokens, but mostly just wants to make a lot of goblins to copy them. It's a copy spells deck. You know what I mean?
So you're utilizing them and making them in different ways.
Yeah. So you're saying because you have decks like this, you don't often have the same cards in them.
I don't find a lot of cards port over to other decks, and I think that's probably the same for you.
I'm exactly the same.
Yeah.
100%. Most of my decks, I have pet cards in decks. I'm completely the same as you. I have decks, and that's, to be honest...
That will never be removed. Like Croson Wayfinder, for example, in your Marin deck.
Yeah.
Never coming out.
No. There are, like, honestly, this is the origins of Thrifty Thursdays. It's like, these are cheap cards that I think more people should be playing, and also I like them. I think they're goofy and weird, and people should have more goofy, weird cards in them. But I will say, I'm going to amend my statement, though, because I had that written as my answer for this question, and then subsequently realized I'm completely wrong. Modal lands.
Oh, MDFCs. Hell yeah.
All those things that are spells on one side and then lands on the other. I play them all the time. I have like 8 Sajiri Shelters. I have like 3 Balaged Recoveries. I have like 5 Malakir Rebirths.
I do see Malakir Rebirth a lot. I play Malakir Rebirth in nearly every back deck, but also the blue one that looks at the top 6 and you get an instant or sorcery.
What's that card called?
It starts with an S. Oh, come on, brain. Think. Something. Oh, it's 2 and a blue. I know the card. Can you look it up?
I'll look it up.
Thank you.
I'll look it up. But yeah, I think besides modal cards, I'm not really like someone who's doing that.
I will say that I have cards that are other people's pet cards in my deck. So I, like, for example, I have a Whip of Erebos in one of my decks because it's an incredibly well-played card from someone in our local community. And every time it's cast, it's Whip of Erebos. I also have Fling in my Firelaf deck because one of my, like, senseis of Magic loves Fling.
Yes.
Basically taught me everything I know about Magic. And I put every version of a Fling effect I could put in my Firelaf deck because I kind of... It's an ode to that player, and I like having other players' pet cards in my decks because... And especially if I've gotten the card from them, I find it's really cool to have their card in my deck. Like Diplomatic Immunity was a card that I used to run that was one of your pet cards, and I put that in my deck for a while. And it's really sweet having friends' cards in your...
But I guess to address the question specifically, we're both saying we don't necessarily, when we're building a deck, we don't have a card that's like, I'm definitely playing this. I think, except maybe the modal spells.
NDFCs for sure.
NDFCs always find their way.
Well, I mean, we
me.
said we'd make merch with NDFCs as a focus.
It's a land on the back.
Pretty pet cards from us.
Yes, but besides that, not really. The card you're thinking of was Salundi Vision.
Salundi Vision.
And it's Salundi Isle on the back as well.
I knew it started with an S.
Yep, you were on it. You were on the right track. Cool. Next question comes from us. From Nick. Nick says, you have the ability to ban one commander. Who do you pick? I mean, I will say that we have addressed this in lengthy form in our ban list episode.
Yeah, we have.
We addressed all the cards that were on the ban list that we thought were worth discussing. And then we also discussed cards we would add to the ban list.
Yep.
But yes, okay, well, we're revisiting it again. Who would we ban?
One
commander. Who are you banning, James?
I've got a couple, but I'm going to say Cosmo Serpent, because... Every time I've tried to play against it, it has won. I don't think I've ever seen a Coma deck lose, personally.
Once it resolves Coma, is what I would say. Once Coma's on the battlefield, it's like, how am I ever going to get out of this?
How do you play against Coma? You cast Dranith Magistrate and protect it with your life.
The arms race.
It's just so good.
Yeah.
It's like, why is it Ophiomancer but bigger and greener? Like, and it's insane.
I know, it's silly.
I would also like to go on a slight tangent here and say I do like... We spoke about this on the ban list episode, but I like the banned as commander thing.
It used to exist. So it's gone now. So now we just have a ban list of cards that are just banned. But we used to have a separate list. So there were cards that were just banned full stop in Commander. You can't play them anywhere.
Yep.
And then there were cards that were specifically banned as Commander.
So you could have them in the 99, but you couldn't have them in your command zone.
Yep. So I think the Braids that is on the ban list was in the banned as Commander camp, for example. I think Golos would probably, if they had this now, when Golos was banned, I think it would not go in the just banned full stop. I think it would go in banned as Commander.
I think so too. But look, again, on that episode of the ban list episode, I did say that I understand the reason why they took it away, because a simple and clean ban list solves so many confusing problems about getting someone into the format, etc., etc.
And it's good to have a short ban list too. So, like, I also have my vote for banning a commander is Turgid.
That was the other one that I had in my head.
Yeah, which is funny. I think both of these were mentioned in the ban list episode, but they're both, to me, they're both commanders that, like, are not really CDH playable, but in a casual game, they're too oppressive to enjoy playing against. It's just too strong of an effect in the 99. I would rather not see it anymore. But yeah, I will say that I agree with you that the ban list being simple is a really good thing. The ban list being short is a really good thing.
Yeah.
And actually having not that many cards on there is good for the format at large.
The thing that I love about the fact that the two commanders that we banned here are Turgid and Coma, I barely see them now.
No.
I think I saw a little bit of them when they came out in both of them Kaldheim.
I know, right?
Wild.
Kaldheim.
And another set that we both said we wanted to revisit. Oh,
Let's
dear.
revisit it, but without Coma or Turgid, please.
Contradicting ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't see them played. So
No,
I'm okay with them. Like, I think if I had to, like, if someone had a gun to my head and was like, ban a card, I'd be like, all right, Coma.
Yeah.
But, like, I wouldn't care if it did or didn't get banned because I just don't see it. So it's fine.
I think it's a really good example of something that didn't immediately make sense to me about the way that the Commander Rules Committee does things, which is that they said that they monitor cards and that often the format controls for them already.
Yes.
So in other words, they know there are commanders like this that come out. Everyone and their dog has built a commander deck now using this thing. Everyone's having a miserable time playing against them. But you know what happens most of the time? People pull those decks apart because they're not fun to pilot. They're not fun to play against.
Yeah.
They care about the people they're playing with and know they don't want to contribute to this awful time. The cards stop seeing played naturally. So
it's actually quite a beautiful thing about our format.
Yeah.
Is
mostly
we care
people care
about how much fun everyone is having.
Yeah. And we intentionally remove cards from our decks if we've noticed they're not much fun to play against anymore.
That's sick. I love our format.
I do. And we have one last question.
Oh, we're nearly there.
We're nearly there. This one comes to us from Jordan, who asks, have any of your opinions or answers on the last Q&A changed in the past year? So he's not referring to episode 50, the one that just came out.
This
is the Q&A, like 10 and 11, I think they were the Q&A part 1 and 2. I had to do some digging. I assume you did too.
I had to pull up our archive of episodes.
Yeah, it's a
which,
long
by the way,
time
our
ago.
writing and outlines of our podcast episodes have just gotten so much better.
Oh yeah, it did not look so good going back to this.
Terrible.
It was not so good. So I did some digging. Some just interesting. There wasn't anything like massive that I noticed, but there were some interesting little observations. My favorite deck of James's that I highlighted was Brudiclad.
Oh yeah, it doesn't exist anymore.
Doesn't exist anymore, but it's funny because now my answer is probably Tornos.
Yeah, you reckon?
I reckon it's probably one of my favorite of your decks to play against.
That's really interesting, and I'm going to call you out here because the last episode you said that you hate playing against combos, and that deck is nothing but combos. But I'm very...
Well, but you don't have very many infinite combos.
That's true.
It's very hard to get off. You highlight it in the rule 0, you can see it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is actually showing some of my growth, I think, as a Commander player.
Good job, Walt.
Seeing the number of hoops you have to jump through for that combo, I'm totally cool playing against it.
Nice.
It's a fun deck to see play out.
I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. My most powerful deck that I said before was Krenko.
Mm-hmm.
Also doesn't exist anymore. But I didn't own Yashan at the time. So I didn't actually
weren't playing CDH at the
I
time.
hadn't played CDH yet. So now my most powerful deck is obviously my CDH deck.
Mm-hmm.
Followed now, probably my most powerful casual deck would be Azor the Lawbringer.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say, like, it just has the best cards in it. I don't know that it's my most consistent deck, but it's like, it's up there.
I also remember that I highlighted that as my favorite Walt deck.
Which is interesting. I see where you're going. Because you said recently, when we talked about decks we would disassemble, you said, I wouldn't mind seeing you disassemble Azor the Lawbringer.
Yeah.
So, interesting what 12 months more of games of Commander played against me will do to a deck where you're kind of like, I'm over it now.
Well, it's less of like I'm over it. I just think it's like, it's more of a I know you, and you're not playing it enough to get enjoyment out of it.
Sure.
And I don't think you play in pods that are at that level. Like, you played it at Command Fest, at a pretty high-powered pod, and you did have fun with it.
Yep.
But, like, that's the first time I've seen you do that, probably in 12 months with that deck.
It's interesting. It sits in a separate... Most of the time when I go to the game store, I have... And people who play with me will know this. I have 3 archives.
The battle boxes.
They have 4 decks in each of them. Azor the Lawbringer actually sits in this really beautiful pearlescent rainbow-coloured...
I've got it here.
Ultimate Guard Boulder. Not Boulder. It's... What are they called? The Satin Towers.
Satin Towers.
Ultimate Guard... Ultra
it's
Pro
like
Satin Tower.
Kind of like kind of chromy, but plastic.
Like a chromatic kind of rainbow colour.
Also
anyway,
beautiful pink sleeves.
Yeah, because it sits in a separate box, I actually have to bring it specifically if I go to the game store, because usually I just grab an archive.
Yep.
And subsequently, it doesn't come along very often. So I wonder if I just put it in a boulder with the rest of them in the archive.
If you'll play it more often.
Maybe I'll play it more often. I don't know.
Maybe. But look, I think it's more like it could make way for a
different kind of deck.
Sphinx type deck or something like that.
That's true. How about you? What's changed for you since the last Q&A?
Interesting. The one that I noticed in the Q&A was actually the fact that there was a question that was, what's your favorite deck that isn't one of ours? Mm-hmm. And I said at the time there was a Cedrus deck played by one of our community members, Jordan, who has asked this question actually. I don't think that's my favorite deck anymore. Mm-hmm. I also highlighted Garth, which was one of our other local community members, which was like a 5-color, my commander is your commander, and
it's like
I do every strategy under the sun.
Tokens go wide, I'll steal your strategy kind of thing.
But also did storm things and
it was funny.
It did everything.
Yeah.
I am now saying that my favorite deck that isn't ours is one of my friends Brad's deck. It's Goro Goro and Satoru, the haste type deck where when a creature deals damage to a player, if it entered the battlefield this turn, you create a 5/5.
That's right.
Dragon.
It's
or 4/4 dragon.
So yeah, you want things with haste or things that give haste. Or just things that can get through the turn they come down. And then you get 5/5s out of it.
But the way that Brad has built this deck, I think, is awesome. It's a ninjutsu deck. So Brad can return creatures to his hand to redeploy them, to have them gain haste and hit again because it's unblockable.
If you ninjutsu into a creature, it did enter the battlefield this turn. That's fun.
It's really sick. And it's also been built at a really fun power level, because I imagine there's ways to play this that are really powerful, because Gorgor and Satoru are also like 3 mana, I think. It's just like Grixis.
Yeah.
They're really low to the ground, really cheap. They've also got a haste enabler inbuilt on them for 1 and a red.
Yeah, it's not a lot to pay.
It's not a lot. I just think the deck was designed in a way that is like, I want to play this at fun casual tables, but doing really complicated, tricky sequences of combat. And specifically for Brad, I think that Brad loves those combat interactions.
Yeah.
I don't see him play it enough though. So Brad, if you're listening, play that deck more. I think it's sick.
Sounds fun. I'd love to play against it. Yeah.
I also noticed that Marchesa was my favorite deck a year ago. Still is.
Nice.
Also, my least powerful deck. I actually think my least powerful deck is now my bear deck. I think that is now my, like...
I would probably agree with that.
Intro. If someone's playing Commander for the first time, I'll usually whip out bears.
Yeah.
It's also just a walking meme.
Yeah.
It's just bears.
4 bears blade is in the deck.
Yeah, because it's 4 bears. Bearscape, I've got the gay art of Bearscape.
Yeah, we love
bears.
that. We do.
But yeah, interesting one. Made me reflect on the last year of us doing this together. Well,
definitely. Well, let's wrap it up a bit. It blows us away to hear the effect we've had on your games of Commander, and it is our absolute privilege to bring you this podcast every Friday. We seriously wouldn't make this content if it wasn't for all of you wonderful people out there. So here's to another 50 episodes or 500.
I hope so. Look, knowing that the conversations that Walt and I have are not only enjoyed by us, but by you as well, is what keeps us making this podcast. It's actually a lot of work to keep things running here at Get Commanded. The research, the writing, recording, the editing, promoting, the emails, the salesmanship, and the frequent teleportation sickness that we incur from traveling across space and time all become worth it when Walt and I get to talk about our favorite game with some of our favorite people on this earth, and that's you. So, Space Commanders, command received. I was getting choked up at the end there. It's very beautiful.
It's lovely. It's
Thank
lovely
you,
what we get
guys.
to do. So to you listeners out there, do you feel commanded? What do you think of our answers to your questions? And is there anything you disagree with?
Yeah, and you can talk to us on plenty of different platforms, but the best way would be like our Discord server, for sure, which we talk about all the time. But you can send us an email as well, and just get in touch with us in many different ways.
You can. You can also follow us on X, the platform that Elon has named after his wife.
Yeah, and also how I imagine he signs his names on documents pertaining to said wife.
Very good. You can follow us on there to see our thoughts on upcoming cards, sets, events, and other Magic the Gathering updates. It's at Get Commanded, or it will be until that platform inevitably
Implodes upon itself.
It's so close. It's so good to see the death rattle. It'll be gone very, very soon.
The trumpet is sounding.
It's true.
And look, don't forget as well, our Patreon is definitely the best way to support the content that Walt and I make, and can lead us to that next 50, 500 episodes that we want to do. And we would like to thank our patrons, Stella Tam and Fuzzy, and make a very special shout out to Fletcher Cutting for supporting us in the Space Commander tier. You are the best.
It's true, you are. And thank you also to Palms Off Gaming, who sponsor this podcast. They make some really fantastic deck boxes, sleeves, binders, and basically anything you would possibly need to keep your cards safe and protected when you go to the game store, when you go anywhere, when you want to flex them in your binder, all that kind of stuff. You can check them out at palmsoffgaming.com.au.
Well, we did it. That's another Q&A wrapped up.
Big
we
one
have
too.
talked a lot about Magic. Let's Planeswalk.
Sure.
It is your week this week. Where are we Planeswalking to this week, Walt?
I'd like to Planeswalk to Granny Bingo.
Like a bingo hall with a lot of grannies in it?
No, I would like to Planeswalk to this outstanding event that happens every month. I think it's the first Monday of every month at Comedy Republic, which is in Melbourne.
Okay.
It's on Burke Street, I want to say. It's somewhere in the CBD there. It's hosted by 2 drag queens.
I'm there.
Or 3 drag queens, I should say.
I'm there even quicker.
Who dress up as grannies.
They do granny drag.
They do granny drag.
I'm all about this,
and
actually.
they host a bingo night. So
No way.
there is an actual bingo that is happening. They spin the wheel, pull them out.
That's
and
sick.
That is like 5% of the actual night. Mostly it's just them being extremely funny and playing the crowd. They like come and interview people in the crowd, make hilariously topical jokes about them, and a lot of very queer humor. So if you're a queer person, definitely recommend. But just for anybody, they're very, very funny. Tickets are very, very cheap, and you just get to sit down and have a very, very good laugh on a Monday night. Me and my co-workers went along because actually one of the people in Granny Bingo used to work at Arts Centre Melbourne.
Oh, that's cool.
It was actually my boss when I started funnily
That's so
enough,
cool.
was the one who recommended that I should become a manager in the team when he left.
Oh.
And then I have subsequently ended up in that role. So
That's
big,
amazing.
huge shout out to him. But yeah, Granny Bingo, highly recommend. They're very, very funny. You can follow them on Instagram at Granny Bingo, I believe.
Oh, cool.
But basically, yeah, it's just like a silly night where they just make queer humor and just generally hilarious comments about people in Melbourne and the kinds of things we get up to. They just celebrated their 8-year anniversary of
Wow, they've been doing it a while.
doing it for a long time.
Like-
And me and my partner, I didn't realize I was going to say this as well. We just went to DragCon literally yesterday.
Oh, sweet.
Big convention. It's on today as well. Not at the time the podcast comes out, obviously,
Is
but
it the exhibition building?
at the Convention and
Yeah.
Exhibition Centre in Melbourne. And they had an entire like sort of booth at DragCon, and they hosted a bingo like halfway through one of the
That's
days.
cool.
It was really cool to see. They are just enormously funny. Like, cannot recommend highly enough.
I am shocked that we haven't gone. This sounds like a thing that we should do as a group activity with both our partners.
This was the first time I'd ever gone. Was
Oh,
with my
let's
co-workers.
do it.
They had done a granny bingo at my workplace once, which was also really, really funny.
Mm.
But yeah, like having gone to one at the actual bar, it's just hysterical.
All right. Well, considering it doesn't fall on Tuesday night, which is Commander Night, we have to go.
It's true.
We'll
And
set
also,
it up.
if we get bored, we can just go around the corner to Plenty of Games. And it'll be Monday night, which is their Commander
Night. True. Yeah.
It's true.
We could top off the night from Granny Bingo with a casual game of Commander.
It's
I
true.
like it.
Maybe. Well, that's just about all we have time for, I reckon. So we'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Goodbye, Commander players.
Bye.